I am Christina Prev, your host of Wake Up Call, the podcast. And joining me today is Kerri Lynn Miller. She is actor, writer, and director. Kerri has co-starred with Jennifer Lopez on Shades of Blue on NBC, Julian McMahon on FBI Most Wanted, CBS, and Peter Coyote on Blue Bloods, CBS. Awaken Her is Kerri's first feature film as writer and director, a female-driven, surreal, psychological thriller about female body dysmorphia. Thank you so much for being here, Kerri.
Oh my goodness, that was such a beautiful introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I've been dying to talk to you about something that's very foreign to me, being a real life actress who's actually working. You're not just someone who says, I want to be an actress one day. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Everyone should pursue their dreams. But you're really doing it, and you're really good at it.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much.
Of course. I've seen you on Instagram. You've posted some clips, and the one in particular that I loved, I don't know where this aired or what it was exactly, but it was you having this weird kind of, it wasn't phone sex, but it was like you were sitting across from each other. And I think the idea was you couldn't touch each other, and you were talking about sales.
Right. So it was basically, I was a sex phone operator, right? So people would call into me and I would help them get off in whatever way they like to get off. And this particular guy who had called in had lost his mojo with his sales and his work. And because of that, he just wasn't feeling very sexy. So we did some role playing, which was really fun because my background is also in sales as well. And it was about getting him all like juiced up over the sale and making the clothes, the hard clothes. And we had so much fun shooting that and being so like over the top and just outrageous. It was outrageous humor is what it was. And that's such a fun like genre to play in.
Well, it struck me when I was watching it that you have to be really free with yourself when you're an actress. You can't say, oh, well, I don't want to simulate orgasm. That's a little too much for me. That's too personal. But there you were doing it. And how do you get past that? Or is that not even a thing?
I think that every actor that I meet, I don't know, there's always something that is a little off, or I don't know what it is, but we just have this thing where, I guess I shouldn't say everybody, but there's just always something a little off where either it's this internal like feel and need to express yourself and at any cost, right? And of course there's training and stuff that goes along with it, but it's just this idea that there's something inside of you that you just want to express and share. And it doesn't, and it's everything, right? Because it's humanity is everything in every color. And just being able to, I guess, have the freedom to do that without, because it's funny because in my real life, I do care what other people think. Like that's something like that I've struggled with. And I think that's why it's so freeing for me in acting to really just lose myself and be so present. And that just feels so amazing to me. It's like a drug, like a hit of a drug for me. So I'm probably going all over with your question, but I do feel that there's just something inside of you, if for actors that I've spoken to, that you just want to connect and express, and and it's like the hit of just losing yourself in it, which frees you,
Not everybody's good at it. So and you are good at it. So how did you discover that you were good at it? And I guess, when did you discover that I guess the expression is, when did you get bitten by the acting bug?
Right. Okay. So I went to WVU, West Virginia University. Let's go Mountaineers. And I went there to become a doctor. And I didn't really I had always loved watching film, and I was always very easily moved. So I could very easily slip into, like, if a girlfriend was talking to me, I would be in their shoes, crying with them. I would feel everything that they were feeling. But other than that, I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be an actor. I had done some modeling, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do acting. So I went to college and I was forced to take an elective, and it was in the arts. And so I signed up for a monologue class. And that's where it happened. I was, on stage and I was doing this monologue, and I just remember feeling alive it was so alive, like on pins and needles, and like just invigorated. And I was like, oh my God, this is everything. This is what I need to do. And so then I graduated college, and my parents were probably not very thrilled to know that I no longer wanted, I think I had an application at Quinnipiac and I was supposed to go there, and I had my room and board set up, and everything was good. And I remember telling my mom, yeah, I don't think I want to do that anymore. And so that was a fun time in the Togno household, which is my maiden name. But yeah, so I think I worked at a bathing suit shop for a while I went to William Esper Studio in the city, and I studied with the amazing Terry Knickerbocker. And I would say it was there that I learned how to access all these different parts of myself. He used to say it's about like throwing paint on the canvas, and we have all these different colors within us, and it's about just throwing it all out there and knowing that we have all of those options within us, and then bringing them out. So it was through that training, Meisner training, and then I did a master's program, another with Meisner as well. So about 3 years of training that I think it started to just come alive, and you start to feel comfortable in your own skin, and you start to know your boundaries, where you can go, you feel comfortable with other actors and trusting. I think trust is a really big thing, is that if you have a teacher that creates a space, which Terry always did for us, where you really felt safe to let it all hang out, and that you weren't going to be judged, and that you could do anything and you'd be okay. And
so you never did anything with theater in high school? Wow. Because I remember the theater kids, that was always their thing, and they loved it from day one, and they had aspirations of going on to do theater or be in the entertainment industry in some fashion. So that's interesting that you didn't actually discover that until college, rather accidentally.
Right. I mean, I did a lot of sports in high school, and I think that's the way, it's interesting. It's the way you're raised, right? Because my family was very much into sports, and that was just a given path for me. Like, that's what I was going to do. Like, my dad was going to coach, so like softball, and, and my sister played basketball. So it was just kind of like, it felt like that was where I went. But I think when you start to get a little bit older, you start to figure out what you want and what lights you up. And unfortunately, I think, now it's different. I think kids are exposed to so many different things, the arts, music, sports, that they really can start to see, what it is. I think parents just have more time and more energy that they put towards to discovering what somebody's true passion is. And I think, when I was growing up, it really wasn't about me picking. It was like, this is what you're going to do. And then as you get older, things start to resonate with you. And I think that was the gift of really figuring out what lights you up.
Were you encouraged to go to medical school? Where do you think that seed was planted? Was it by someone else, or
no?
You?
I think that's a great question. I think that I was always drawn to the human body, and I still am. I got involved in high school in this athletic training program, and it was really interesting. Like, I learned so much about, the human body, and I kind of thought that would be an interesting opportunity to explore. And so I went to college, and I was exercise physiology major, and I graduated from the School of Medicine and thought that's the path I was going to go in. But I guess you don't know until you know.
Well, when you signed up for that monologue class, it's kind of like public speaking. It doesn't sound like you were nervous about that at all. Were you?
It's interesting, right? Because different than public speaking, right? Because I hate public speaking, and I'm not good at public speaking, because public speaking is like, it's you, and you're just like in front of all these people, and you're just talking to all of these people watching you. And versus a monologue is very different, because you are playing a character, you're becoming somebody different than you, and you're creating this world of who you're talking to, right? So I'm not really necessarily talking to all of the people who are in the audience watching me or my classmates. It's like I'm focused in on, each monologue is like you're talking to somebody, right? They may not be there, but that's who you're talking to. So for me, that felt more, that felt easier. It's always been easier for me to do stuff like that because I just get lost in that. However, I definitely, hands down, I think, when we talk about like earlier in our conversation, like it's what you say it is, it's either like nervousness or excitement. And so I mean, my heart is beating, but I think that feels great. I like being on the edge of my seat. I like, having that energy pumping through my veins. And so I just try to put that in a good place of that's excitement versus like nervousness, because then that can become debilitating and very fearful. Right. So.
Well, like you said, you can characterize it however you want. You can call it nerves or jitters or excitement.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have to comment on your Mona Assemi earrings. I have those exact same ones.
Oh my God. Is she not the best? And this is like my Wonder Woman band. I don't know what you want to call it, but I love this thing. And whenever I'm doing something like this, where I just want to show up and like shine and be bright, I put this on and I feel like Wonder Woman. So thank you, Mona.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Mona on my podcast. So if you have any pull there, she wants to be on it, but I think she's not used to being as much in front of the camera as you are. So
she's a doll. She's so talented and she's amazing. I mean, she's just worked with like Beyonce and stuff. So yeah, her jewelry is fabulous. So for anybody watching this, check out Mona Assemi.
Yes, and I was gonna wear a pair of her earrings that but I was in a hurry and I didn't have time to find them. So whatever. Plug for Mona. Okay, so the monologue, was that something you wrote?
No, you mean it back in college?
Yeah.
No, and I don't even remember what it was, to be honest with you. I know it was like you had to, pick it from this monologue book. So I researched it, and I know that's crazy, but I think I just have the worst memory. But I cannot remember for the life of me what it was about. I just knew I loved it. I knew I felt exhilarated when I was done, but I seriously think I have the worst memory ever, which I have good short-term memory for like memorizing scripts or like, here. But if you ask me, like, I think people could actually fool me and recreate my past because I wouldn't be able to remember.
I think I'm the same way.
Right?
I'm the same way. We have to maybe talk about that more. But so how did you told me about all the training that you've had that you embarked on after the monologue experience, but when did you actually, get yourself out there to get acting jobs, and how did you do that?
Okay. So during the 2-year program that I enrolled in, at William Esper Studio, you have to kind of agree that you're not going to pursue work. But I ended up going out for this audition, and it was at the Billie Holiday Theater in the middle of like downtown, like Bed-Stuy. And it was this off-Broadway production, and I really resonated with the character. So I went and I auditioned for it, thinking I wasn't going to get it. I'm just in school, just for practice. And I ended up booking it, and it was a paying role, like a professional paying role. And so I remember having this conversation with my teacher, and he was like, because it's a professional role and you're getting paid, then you can, go do it. So he ended up supporting me in doing that. And now I know why they don't want you doing that, is because before you have your full training, you learn, I learned a lot on the job, I'll say, so to speak, because it was my first time doing, a live performance, and it just was a very big learning stage, because you're learning about, how to project, how to be on stage and be in front of a large audience. And so for me, that was like a really like on the job training, which I was grateful that my teacher had allowed me to do. But that was a huge learning experience for me, for sure.
So did you feel green?
I did. Yes. I felt green. That's I felt like, I just felt like what you were talking about, like very nervous. Like I had a hard time changing that into excitement. And I would say for like the first week of performances, I had a lot of fear that I was like working through, right? Because because this, I had been in my very trusting class and like everybody supported everybody. And this is like, now I had a director to please, who was giving me notes every night. You have the audience that's reacting with you. You've got other actors that have done this, that like had done it many times before. And, this was my first go at it. So these were all these things. And you start to realize in life that everything, whether it's a career in sales and business or sports or acting, that everything is so freaking mental. Like you have to have your mental game in check. Otherwise you will just crumble, and it took me, like, I had to rise to that occasion because I was definitely working through a lot of fear in the beginning, for sure.
But that's incredible that was that your very first audition?
So before that, that was my very first audition for stage. But before that, I had gone in, remember when soaps were popular in New York? There's really not a lot anymore. I had auditioned and I had these small roles on like All My Children and One Life to Live, I think it was, like smaller roles that I had just gone in. But it's very different I think it's very different being on camera versus being on stage. I personally like being on camera much better than being on stage. And I just think it's the people who can do both. I'm just like, wow, I'm like amazed and in awe by, but because it's definitely a different muscle. I mean, when you're live and you are just on, it's definitely a different muscle than being able to say, cut and do another take or adjust in the moment. There's more of like a relax, freer sense versus like, oh, I have to get it right on, like, in front of everybody. So I prefer film.
Well, I've heard some actresses say that they like the immediate feedback that you are experiencing when you're on stage.
Yeah. And I did oh my God, there's nothing better. So now I feel like I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth, but there's nothing better than when people are laughing at you, when you when you're doing something funny, or you can feel them in in a moment of like, you're delivering some, heavy news, or you're having this really, intense connection, and you can just feel it in the room. Like there is nothing like that, for sure. I just don't think my body could handle it because it's a lot. It's just like, it's just a lot on your body to do that. Like, and I say that because just physically, your heart is going constantly. And I just haven't mastered that yet. I'm not saying that won't be at some chapter in my life in the future, and I'm open to it, but it scares me more than film and TV, for sure.
Yeah. I just remember one time I had a radio show, and it was really my first experience into doing anything like that. I didn't have my podcast at the time, and I had to record some promos, and it was the dumbest thing. All of a sudden, because I was expected to do this and I wasn't just winging it, and I had to say it a very particular way, and I knew they were going to be running it. All of a sudden I got nervous, and it was like the most basic things I just couldn't say. And it took several takes, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is so stupid. So that's such a small example compared to what you do, but I think I can totally understand that. Yeah. So it's not for everybody.
No, I don't think so. I think it definitely takes, people will say, if there's anything else that you're good at, like do that, because the industry is really hard. It's hard to break into, because it's like that old catch, like which came first, the chicken or the egg? And it'd be like, well, how do I go out and audition if I don't have an agent, and then how do I get an agent? And so there's always these things, which is very different than in the real world, I guess, where like, if you want to be a doctor, you do A plus B and that equals C. You can be a doctor, you have to pass your tests, of course, and all of that, but there's like a clear plan. This is very, and probably this is why I like it. It's very like unknown, and it's a very like, you just have to trust and like just keep doing the work that you're going to wind up. Either someone's going to say, hey, meet my manager, or, you audition for an agent, or all sorts of things. But it's a hard thing, and it's like a chicken and egg thing, because you're trying to, so for people who are trying to get into the industry, it's like, it's tricky, because you can't really just say, go here, and then you're going to automatically be picked up by an agent or a manager or something,
Were you going on auditions initially without an agent?
Yeah. So, so like back when I was in school, I would go to backstage.com, and you could see all of the non-union stuff. I guess there's some union in there too, but mostly non-union stuff. And you could just apply. Like you could set up your account, put your headshot, and you could put like a reel or a clip of you doing something, and you can send it out, and then they could call you in directly from there. So that was a great way to feel like, empowered, like that while, you're hoping that you get repped by a manager that can get you in for more like legit jobs, that you're still being able to work on your craft and hone your skills, get comfortable auditioning, and get some like footage for your reel.
Okay. So then when did you get an agent? When did you decide, I think it's time for me to get an agent?
Yeah. Okay. I remember doing a showcase, and a showcase would be something, you would maybe like, you would get a scene, you'd get a scene partner, and usually a school or an intermediate type of a company that would bring agents to watch potential actors. You could sign up for one of those and do it. So I did a showcase, and I remember somebody, they liked me. So they brought me in, and then I ended up, signing with them, and it's just kind of been from there. But, it takes a while to figure out. I feel like I'm still figuring out like where my home is and stuff, with regards to do I need an agent or do I need a manager? I've had both at different times, and, like right now I just have a manager, and that feels good to me right now. So.
Yeah, I think you have to go with what's working and what feels good for you.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of tie in our conversation to your first feature, Awaken Her, because I want to hear more about that, because you are going off into another direction there. You're putting on a lot more hats. But I want to talk about the inspiration for that, because you and I have talked before privately about it, generally about plastic surgery and your experience with that. And in general, I don't think we can avoid just talking about beauty standards and how that applies to being a working actress, because we know that even if you're not a working actress, if you're not someone on camera, we all still, as women, we feel those pressures to look a certain way, to be beautiful, whatever that means, to be thin or to have certain features. And now everybody wants a big butt. Like 20 years ago,
Nobody wanted one.
Nobody wanted a big butt. Like J-Lo was considered to have a big butt. J-Lo now does not have a big butt.
No. Yeah.
So it changes over time. But I wanted to talk to you about your experience with that.
Yeah.
What have you felt those pressures as an actress to look a certain way?
Oh, yeah. So I personally have always struggled with, when I was younger, because I've definitely gotten through this, but when I was younger, I always struggled with the way I looked. And I think about it often, like, why did I struggle so much with that? And I think it had to do with a combination of, it's kind of like, there's this quote, like, we all think we're pretty until somebody tells us otherwise, right? We're like these happy-go-lucky kids, and things happen, and everything's going well, and then something happens and you're just like, oh shit, I didn't realize like anybody else saw this, or I didn't realize this was a thing, right? And so I think that's kind of what happened to me with regards to my nose. Like I always had like my dad is Italian, and I was blessed with his more authentic, ethnic Italian nose, and my brother and my sister did not have that. And so I felt a little bit different right from the beginning. And I remember people in my family, like grandparents, like making comments about it and just drawing it to your attention. And you start to feel like it starts to become a thing, right? And then you start to look in like magazines and around you, and you don't see necessarily like you or your nose looking back at you. And you start to think that there's something wrong with you, and that you need to fix something about yourself. And for me, it just started to create these feelings of like self-loathing, like just not feeling like like, I guess I equated all of my self-worth with the way I looked on the outside. And that never worked for me. So this happened at a very, like, very young age. And then, you know, I like to say, like, there's usually these like pivotal moments that kind of cement it for you. And I had like this traumatic experience happen to me, that made me really just question my self-worth and feel like if I had been prettier, this wouldn't have happened to me. Or if I, you know, because there's a certain sense in the society that we live in that things are just easier for people who look a certain way, right? And that there's a certain amount of power that they have. There's a certain amount of social clout that they have, whether it's in high school, whether it's in, work life, there's always that. So that happened to me. And then I was just convinced that I needed to fix myself. So I went on to work in pharmaceutical sales. And that's when right around the time that I had graduated college, and I was now exploring acting and, understanding, more about myself through those classes I was taking. But then at the same time, I was, selling Botox and Juvederm and filler and everything you could imagine. I worked for Allergan, to plastic surgeons and dermatologists. And it was a great job, and I really enjoyed it. And what I saw from there, though, is that there's usually like these two groups of women. And there's one group of women that come in and they feel good about themselves. They're like empowered. They're badass. They're just like, hey, I just want to like, refresh the lines between my face, and I'm good. I like myself. I'm good. Like very, very empowered. Very. I could tell they had a lot of self-worth, and they weren't there because they felt like a deep sense of like self-loathing about themselves. And then there's another group, which I think I fell into, which was that like, I did have a lot of self-loathing about myself, and I did equate all of my self-worth with the way I looked. And I felt that I constantly needed to fix myself, because I felt like, if anybody found out who I was, before I changed myself, that I would be abandoned, that I would be like, not like loved, that I would be like, not important. Right. So it was like this facade that I felt like I had to just continue with. And, working in that atmosphere, I had access to a lot of those things. And, like from lasers to, fillers and all of those things. And it kind of contributed to me continuing to hide who I was. Right. So then after that, I can't even remember how so through acting, somebody, gave me that book, The Power of Now. And so I started reading that. Then I started to get into meditation. And then I started to really understand like that this is just our costume, and that it's the spirit inside that matters, right? That's who we are. And that was such a huge defining moment for me personally, because then I could just like let go of like, when you know who you are, it's just a very freeing feeling. And it took me a long time to get there. Right. So then here I was, I felt like I was on the other side of things. And, and I'm acting, my career is, I'm doing, working in TV and stuff, but I'm not really fulfilled, because I feel like there's stories that I want to tell, and especially stories that share the same pain point as me. So I get pregnant, and it's during this time period, my son's 8 years old. So 8 years ago that I start writing this script. And this script really deals with a lot of the themes that I struggled with, right? Like, you write what you know. And I felt that so many other women could relate to these issues about self-worth and identity and personal rebirth, and doing it in a fun, entertaining way, and having it set in the plastic surgery world. So that's what I set out to do. And I'm an actor by trade. So I had to like teach myself how to write, take all these classes, and, get involved in writers groups. And I had my ass handed to me multiple times, just because, it took me a while to figure out the structure of it. Cause it's like storytelling, you could have a great story, but there's certain structures that you don't have to, but that, really help guide telling a story that's entertaining in a way that holds the audience's attention. So like learning all of that. And then, so now here I am with this story and producing it, and I'm gonna, direct it, and I'll probably play a smaller role in it. We want, an A-list talent to play the main role. But that's pretty much my journey from like where it happened with me early on to how I got to here.
So so I'm assuming you got a rhinoplasty.
I did, yes. I failed to mention that. So when I was 18, I got a rhinoplasty because I was very much ashamed of the way I looked. But then the funny thing is, then I felt ashamed for doing the rhinoplasty because my parents and like people be, oh, well, God made you that way and this, that. So it was like, I realized that none of that stuff mattered. It wasn't until I got into the inside, like with my meditation, that I was able to feel finally good and free with things.
Well, I can relate to the nose thing. I didn't have a rhinoplasty, not yet anyway. Maybe one day. But I can relate to that. You know, I have an Italian nose. It's kind of big, although my mom always says it fits your face. It's like, okay, you didn't say it wasn't big. You just said it fit my face. And
Oh my God.
and I'm really like bearing a lot right here. When I was in grade school, there were some kids that called me Gonzo.
Yeah.
Which sounds funny now, but at the time, you know, that is hurtful. I mean,
devastating. It shatters your self-worth. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, everybody else is recognizing this about me.
Right.
And I can relate to what you said about, you know, just hearing family members say certain things. And I'm sure that if they knew the impact that it was having on you on the inside, maybe they would have been more careful about what they were saying, but they didn't know. But at the end of the day, those kinds of comments, they really can make a difference and influence a child who then grows up and internalizes all of that. And it just kind of grows and festers until you grow up and you're on a podcast talking about how you want to get a nose job. So, did you tell your family before you got the rhinoplasty that you were going to do it?
Yes. And that's when, I didn't get any support from that. It was like, God made you this way. And, and I remember pretty much having to do it all on my own. So I probably didn't go to the best place. And like, it was just something I felt like I had to do in order to survive, and so I didn't have necessarily support from where it's very different. Like where nowadays, don't you feel like, things are different where, I feel like kids can come to their parents more. Like, I don't blame my parents for, not maybe recognizing that I was struggling with something, because, back then nobody really, I don't feel like body dysmorphia was a thing maybe with eating disorders and stuff, but not necessarily with, things like your nose. I don't think they understood that. But nowadays, I think that, there's more open communication between children and their parents. And I think everything's more accepted. So there's less shame, I think, but there still is a lot, because in some ways it's gotten better, but in some ways it's gotten 10 times worse with all like the filters and social media and like, the Kardashians and everybody trying to be something they're not. Right. So I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I think back then, whenever that is, maybe really before social media and before everything was so present and accessible on the internet, I didn't know people in my circles who were getting plastic surgery. Maybe the wealthy people were doing that in their circles, and they didn't have as much either. I mean, if you look at older actresses, like Joan Crawford and people in her genre, you can see them aging, like Elizabeth Taylor. You can see them aging on screen because they didn't have Botox and they didn't have Juvederm and those things. Really, all you could do is wait until it was time to get a facelift.
Right.
And even then, the technology now is so much better. And the methods of, different ways to do a facelift. There's all kinds of different facelifts that I've heard that maybe I should have a plastic surgeon come on and school us a little better there. But that was it. So I think it has evolved, and it's more common now to have to talk to you or to talk to a girlfriend of mine who is getting Botox and is getting Juvederm and things like that. It doesn't seem as foreign.
Right.
But I do still think that there is a stigma associated with it, and a lot of women aren't so willing to talk about it.
Right.
And the example that I love to give is the Kardashians, because as open as they are about everything in their lives, I mean, they've birthed on television and, talked about very personal, embarrassing things, but they don't talk about their plastic surgery. Disclaimer, I don't know for a fact they've had it, but it's mighty suspicious. But why won't they talk about that?
Yeah, that is so interesting. It's funny, as I feel like, as a disclaimer, I need to say that I'm not against plastic surgery by any means. I'm more about like understanding the why behind why you're doing something. But when I think about the Kardashians, to answer your question, I don't know. I know for me, everything, like, again, I felt like if somebody found out like that I had changed my nose or done that, like, for me, it felt like the worst thing ever, right? For a period of time. Now I talk about it because I'm on the other side of it. But there is a certain amount of like, if somebody finds out who I really am, that maybe I'm not perfect, that I wasn't born this way, that then I will be abandoned or thought of less of, like all those things. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it's a real feeling, like, of, that shame there, and that intense, that you would rather do anything in your power than share. Like, you would rather hide that than tell anybody. You'd rather cut off your left arm than tell anybody, right? So it's this whole facade, but it's very freeing. And I don't understand. And so that I do understand why people don't talk about it as much, because I still think that there's a lot of shame around it.
Yeah, there really is. And actually, I have a really funny story about that too. This was kind of bold. Like, I don't know. Sometimes things just slip out of my mouth and I think about them later. But I was sitting in a plastic surgeon's office and there was this girl sitting next to me, young, and I just looked at her and she seemed friendly. And so I leaned in and I go, "So what are you in for?" She would not answer me.
Oh, right.
And I'm like, "But we're both sitting here. We're both here to get something done."
Right.
But I just, I didn't bother her because I was like, oh, I guess she doesn't want to talk about it, even though we're both sitting here, in the plastic surgeon's office. So I don't know. Was that horrible to say that? What would you?
No, you were being candid and cute and authentic. But I think, like, the other thing that we explore in my film is that, beauty equals power, and power protects you from getting hurt. That's literally a line that one of my characters says. And so there is a power thing that's happening too, that people don't want to give away that information, because that's what makes them feel a little bit more powerful, whether it's that good about themselves. Maybe they feel like they're giving themselves an edge with whatever it is in the workforce, in their job, in their dating, in their whatever it is. Some people don't necessarily want to give up that edge, but I hope that things change and that women can start being more authentic, because the message that it sends to other younger generations and women is just that we continue, that we are feeding into this perpetuating cycle of shame, of like, there's something wrong with us, versus if we start to understand like who we really are and what's really happening, we can make decisions from much better places, rather than like the self-loathingness or the feelings of being inadequate.
So what led you to believe that you were pursuing these treatments because of self-loathing? Like, what was there a moment when you realized this?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's not a moment. It's like this void inside of you that's like, you never feel like good. And it's just this, like, you keep trying to feel good, but you are filling yourself up with all of these things outside of yourself. And until you look at what's going on inside, it doesn't matter like what you do or how much you take in or how much you try to fix yourself or do these things. It doesn't work. And that's why I always say, like, like plastic surgery isn't a bad thing. And a lot of women that do it from a place like they know who they are and stuff, it can be maybe a very empowering thing. But in my case, that's not what I did. And so I just had, I just lived with that feeling for a while. And
is that something that you feel like your past, is it completely absent, or do you feel like it's something that still kind of presents itself occasionally?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do feel like I'm on the other side of it, right? Because once you can kind of name things and you know what's going on and you're aware, you kind of know your tendencies. So, like I said, I think it's been this cathartic journey. I think acting has helped me to really feel safe and like understand that whatever I am sharing of myself is okay. And that just to really be able to accept myself that way. And also through the meditation, I think these things combine to really, and then having my son also really, I felt like it affected me. I really kind of understood more. Well, you feel like the greatest love ever when you have a child. And so I guess the question, to answer your question, is I think that there's always going to be like a remnants of that, like some old patterns that I am aware of that I stay away from. But I feel I'm on the other side of it from a standpoint of, I don't have that self-loathing anymore. I don't have that empty feeling anymore. And I know who I am spiritually. So spirituality has helped me a lot with that. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way I can answer that.
That's a great answer. I love it. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
But how do you, I feel like sometimes when you're struggling with something like that, and then going into acting is like going into the lion's den. I mean, I can't think of another industry where there's more pressure to be beautiful and perfect. So how do you handle that? And maybe if there are any examples that you would be comfortable sharing, have you felt those pressures? Either does it come from other actresses? Does it come from industry people?
Yeah, I have definitely, I mean, yes, I have felt so many pressures. I can remember specifically taking this one class. I'm not going to name any names, but it was with a casting director, and the casting director was basically like, you need to be perfect. You need to get like, hair extensions. You need to get your eyelashes done. Your skin needs to be flawless. Like everything needed to be perfect. Like I just remember feeling, holy shit. Like, and then, so there was that, like that. So yes, there was many of those times, whether I was, meeting with an agent who, it's always they're like saying, change your hair, do this. It's always about the outside. Like that's happening a lot. But I will tell you this, that every bigger role that I have booked has been from a place of, like, I can remember Blue Bloods, right? It was this, I remember auditioning for it. And I just found out that the man that I was having an affair with is, like leaving me or something like that. And so just being so committed to the true authenticity of this character and forgetting, I mean, I was crying, I was a mess, right? Not caring about what I looked like, but just rather connecting and like putting what my character was trying to do in front of whatever insecurities I might have had as me, Kerri, as a human. That has always helped me and served me, because those are the moments that I booked, is when I just get out of my way and I just show up as me, and in all like whatever's happening. Those are the moments that people connect with me. So
well, I always hear that, like, that's sort of what me as I guess you could call me a layman, not being an actress or being in the industry. You guys need to have some ugly people in the movies, because I see them, they're either extras or they're in a supporting role. I mean, there are fat, ugly people. Maybe that's not PC to say that, but they're normal. They're just normal people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so are they like in just a different category? I mean, if somebody like that is going to go get an agent and say, I'm just like your normal everyday person. I want to get acting gigs to play roles that you need for just normal everyday people.
Yeah, that's out there. And yes, like I can think of like Orange is the New Black. Like, I mean, that was probably like the first show that I started to see like, oh my God, yes, these real people, authentic, diverse, that you could really just feel like, the energy coming from them. That was so exciting. And I love that. And my film, we're going to be a low budget. And we're also doing the diversity clause. So that, yes, we are required in order to get a better tax something or another to have a certain amount of diversity in our film, which I love. And I think that is the way it needs to go. I mean, when you think about even just the fact that you and I grew up watching films that I think it's like only 5% of the films we watched were directed by a woman. So that means every film that you and I have watched has been told through the gaze of a male. So how they see the world and how they see women in the world. So then when we're watching it, our subconscious mind is saying, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be in the world. This is how I'm supposed to look. I'm an arm charm. I'm, the scantily clad dressed girl. I'm, all of these things. And that's why I think right now, I am so excited to share this story because it's a woman's story, right? It's about the stuff that how we see ourselves, and it's about moving through that. But it's also, I'm so excited about these other stories that people are sharing now. Like you're seeing so much more of diversity is what you're saying. And that we got a lot of ways to go, but you're starting to see, a crack in that.
Yeah. And I do love that we're seeing, I'm going to put this in finger quotes, older actresses in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are getting great roles and the movies are telling great stories, because probably 10 or 20 years ago, not that long ago,
right,
you just wouldn't have seen them. They
right.
would have put a 30-year-old in that role.
Totally. And like once you hit that age, whatever it was, you were written off completely. But now like people like Reese Witherspoon, Jennifer Garner, Kate Winslet, I don't know if you saw Easton on HBO Max. I mean, fantastic. You're starting to see yourself, and that's what we need to see. Like that is reality. We don't all, we live in like a youth obsessed beauty world, society. And I get that, but there's so many interesting stories out there to be told if you just tweak things a little bit, and we start to open it up.
Yeah. And I have to ask you this.
Oh God.
Did you ever have any sort of experience with the casting couch? Like anybody saying, well, if you just do this, I'll get you a good role. Anything like that?
Yes.
Was it Harvey Weinstein?
No. But no, I'm not gonna I obviously can't name names, but yes, I was definitely put in situations where it was very clear that if I engaged in a certain way that I would have a lot of opportunities laid out before me. And it is just this is another thing that we explore in the film, is these patriarchal foes and this like power thing, right? When an abuse of power, when somebody has power and they misuse it because they want to get something that they want, and then the person that they're engaging with also wants something, it becomes very hard. Because when I think about Harvey Weinstein, these actresses who went into his room, they really wanted something. That was their dream, that was everything. And I can relate to that so much. And so I don't judge anybody for having done anything, because when you're in a position where that power is being held over you and you're a woman, sometimes it's hard to see that there's any other path through it to being successful, or there's any other possibilities, right? So yeah, I have been in situations where that has happened to me. And, in all transparency or truthfulness, for me, you try to walk a line where you're not going over the line, but you're still like, maybe, I don't know, putting it out there because you feel like, oh, that could potentially work or happen, but it never works. It never works, because they always want everything. And you end up not doing that, or I end up not doing it. And it's a waste of time. So, the lessons that I have learned is that you just have to trust and be true to yourself, and trust that your talent and everything will get you to where you need to go. And it's hard, because you have your values.
In those situations, was it really explicit, or was it more subtle?
I think in the situation I'm speaking of, it's so hard, right? It's such a fine line because you're saying subtle or specific. Well, there's a certain way that somebody can touch you when you're talking to somebody that you just know, okay, that was more than that, but that's subtle, but that's specific, right? So it's very hard to answer that question, I think, because every bit of your intuition and every bit of your senses tells you that that's specific and you know it. But yet, if you talked about it, you could kind of talk yourself around it and be like, well, he was probably, this is probably just, he's friendly, or just, so it's tricky. And of course, they don't do it specifically, like, unless they're, maybe like Harvey Weinstein, and literally they have that much power where they can say, if you want to be in the Marvel movie or whatever, you're going to do A, B, and C. But that has never happened to me, where like, do A, B, and C of this. But the subtleties and the that sort of stuff, yes.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to relate this to Lance Armstrong, but when he got in trouble for doping, his argument was, well, everybody else was doing it too. So you really had to dope just to move yourself to be on the same level as the people that you're competing with. So, and the reason I'm asking this is it kind of like that sometimes in acting? Do you start to feel like, well, I'm not doing this, so that means the actresses that are willing to do that, those are going to be the people that get ahead. So how can you actually just be recognized for your real talent if you know that there are roles that are just going to people because, they played the game better?
Right. I think that for me, it's just about understanding that there are limitless possibilities, and that might feel like it's the only way. And that might be somebody else's path, and I don't begrudge them for that. But for me, it's been about, creating. Like, that's why I'm creating this film. And because I feel really passionate about telling this story. And I don't want to give my power over to somebody else to tell me what stories I can tell and what stories I can't tell, or whether I'm going to be successful or not. Like, I'm a smart girl. I'm talented. I know that I can create something. And I really do believe that there are limitless possibilities, and that once you open yourself up to that I think you start to see clearer that, yes, while that may have felt like that was the only way at that time, that there's always another way. And I think you just, at the end of the day, you just have to be able to say, can I look at myself in the mirror if I do these things, and will it even feel good once I get them? So, and for everybody, that's going to be a different answer. And
yeah,
so I think it's just a real personal thing. But for me, thank God it hasn't happened to me so much, but it has happened. And so I know, it seems as you move up, it happens more. But
seems like it's just the woman experience, right? I mean, no matter what industry, definitely certain industries, it's more prevalent,
right,
more pronounced, maybe more overt,
right.
But I think as women, that's just our experience in the world.
Absolutely.
I think somebody did a TED talk, and she stood on the stage and she asked everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you've ever been careful about where you parked at night, or if you don't go running at night because it's not safe, or, any variety of examples. And only the women in the room raised their hands, not the men. And it was really striking to see that we just, as women, we're accustomed to certain expectations about how people treat us, and we have to tailor our lives and our behaviors around that. And that men really don't.
Absolutely. I mean, and like you said, this is like in every aspect of a woman's life, like, I'm an actor, but like, what about the corporate woman, because the reality is we live in a patriarchal society, right? Where men hold the power. And so because of that, we're going to find ourselves in these situations. And until that starts to change, where we see an equal amount of women up at the top as well, this is what we're experiencing,
Yeah, I agree. Totally. Well, thank you for sharing all those personal stories. I really appreciate it. And I do want to end with you telling us more about the movie. Where is it in production? And can you, without giving anything away, what is the plot of the movie?
Sure, of course, of course. So we're in pre-production right now. We're raising equity for the film. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to wefunder.com and search the name of the film. It's Awaken Her is the name of the film. And you'll see a video of me talking about why I'm passionate about it. And you'll see all of our pitch deck materials too that tell you the details about the film, who's involved, and all sorts of those fun things. But the story is about, it follows a woman who's psychologically damaged at a young age, and she hides her pain behind plastic surgery. And as this inner battle is kind of raging with her, she loses her grip on reality, and she heads down a dangerous path of revenge to right the wrongs from her past.
Well, that sounds deep.
Yeah.
That sounds right up my alley. I love movies like that.
Yep.
So who would you absolutely love to see play the main part?
Absolutely. Jennifer Garner is like my first choice for sure. I think she would be excellent in this. And, you know, what I see is that she is such a talented actress, and she does a lot of like family oriented type of films. And so I think this would be a really fun role for her to like sink her teeth into. It's definitely more dark and twisty. But then also somebody like Amy Adams, I think, is a great choice too. So I think those two would be like my top two for this.
I love Amy Adams. I just saw her in Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. And I love Jennifer Garner too. So all good choices. I can't wait to see it. So I know a movie really takes forever, doesn't it?
Well, it's like once you raise the equity, then it scoots, because then you have about anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks in pre-production. And then we're doing about a 25-day shoot, and then about, 15 weeks post-production. And then nowadays there's different ways, like we're hoping to get distribution before we even go out. But then there's other ways of going the film festival route and getting distribution that way. But it's a really exciting time because there's so many streamers, and everybody's so hungry for content. And here's what I love about WeFunder is this is very different than, if you go to a Kickstarter or something like that, it's just people throwing money that they never see back, right, into a project. WeFunder is equity crowdfunding. So it allows people to invest and have a stake in the success of the project. Like they can get a return on investment from investing in the project, and they can invest for as little as $250. And why I like this is because when I think about who has control over what content gets released to like Netflix and Hulu and all these things, a lot of times it's people we don't even know who are up at the top who are picking out what we're going to watch, right? But this gives everybody, it evens the playing field, and it gives people a say over the content that they feel excited about. So if you're a woman, we represent 50% of the population, and you want to see films about, these types of topics and stuff where you can see your light, see some of your struggles, all of these things, then it allows you to get behind like a social impact film that you can feel like, yeah, I was part of bringing that to the world. I was part of birthing that. And I think that's so cool, because how many people get exposed to be a part of a film like that?
I think that's so cool. And I will have links to everything in the show notes for anybody that is interested in learning more. And I will be watching you on Instagram, and we'll have a link to your Instagram page too, because I love when you share your acting moments. So the clips, I love them. So keep putting those out there.
Okay, I will. I had so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I loved it. Thank you for saying yes.